Yesterday marked 1 year since I first rode the Crux, and I absolutely loved it. But in the last year, there have been a handful of bikes that have come out, and a few have really piqued my interest, especially as do-it-all bikes. And so I think it begs the question, is the Crux really worth it a year later? Especially since I've swapped chainrings, wheels, tires, stems, seat posts, derailleurs, just about everything to get my Crux to the point that I really, really like it. About a year before the Crux launched, I remember talking to a friend about the possibilities of a do-it-all bike. A bike that could be fun on the road, and it could be fast and stable on gravel as well. And we kind of had this continuous text thread, and we go back and forth sharing different ideas about how we could tweak this bike or that bike to make it something that would work in road mode as well as gravel mode. Fast forward to October of last year, and there I was at Sea Otter with the Crux that had just recently launched. And as soon as I saw it, I realized that was it. That was the bike. I mean, that bike had endless possibilities if it could be built up just right. To get my Crux to the final phase, if you will, it's gone through 3 phases that I want to talk about today. And hopefully my tinkering and experimenting through each phase will help you fast forward or leapfrog a couple phases in your own do-it-all bike build. And I should add that this isn't exclusive to just the Crux. As always, I share my perspective as a pretty normal dude. I ride around 7,500 miles a year, hold down a normal 9-to-5 job, and I enter the occasional race. But man, I love smashing the pedals with friends in between work, life, and family obligations. Oftentimes getting out early in the morning and getting back before my kids are even out of bed. And I don't get paid to ride a bike, and none of these videos are sponsored, which is really cool because I can talk about whatever I want to and share whatever opinion I want to share. Anyways, enough disclaimers. Let's dive into each phase of this build. Phase 1 was kind of the marriage between the open upper and the Crux. See, prior to owning the Crux, I had an open upper, which is a fantastic bike. And I basically ported all of the parts from the upper over to the Crux. So the Crux basically started its life with a 1x drivetrain with a 42 tooth chainring, a 1050 or 1052 cassette, an eagle axis rear derailleur, a zip stem, a zip seat post, and a set of reserve 32 wheels with 38mm Gravel King SK tires. And it was pretty awesome on gravel. On road, yeah, not so much. Because I had always envisioned the Crux as being something that was fast on road as well as gravel, well, the gearing just simply didn't work. So I swapped out that 42 tooth chainring for a 50-37 double chainring. I swapped out that rear derailleur for a SRAM Force medium length derailleur. I put on a 1036 cassette. I added a Tarmac SL7 stem because I really like that out front mount, and all my lights are kind of geared towards that based on the Tarmac. I also added, of course, a new left shifter with the ability to shift a front derailleur. I added a SRAM Force wide front derailleur, and I think that's about it for phase 2. I might have swapped a saddle as well. Oh, and I did add the Zip 303S wheels. So I swapped out those reserve 32s for Zip 303Ss with a pair of 43mm Gravel King SS tires, and they were awesome. That 50-37 chainring just proved to be way too big for gravel. It was fantastic on the road, but on gravel it just wasn't realistic. And with those huge 43mm tires, it just felt like I had endless top end, but anytime I had to climb, I was always out of the saddle, and it was kind of problematic. So I swapped that chainring for a 48-35, and I feel like that's kind of been a good sweet spot. Good for gravel, good for climbing, but also still good for some top end on the road. I think if I was doing more climbing, I'd probably put a 46-33 on there if you insisted on having a double chainring. Eventually, I punctured those Gravel King SS tires, and I plugged them to the point that they were beyond use. So I swapped them for a set of 42mm Pathfinder Pro tires, a tire that I had heard a lot about, but I just never tried, and I don't know, it just felt like I already had so much Specialized stuff on the setup. I kind of liked that they were Gravel King tires. But I ended up really liking those Pathfinder Pro tires. I also ran into issues with the Zip 303Ss, specifically the rear hub. And it was a quick, easy fix. It was just an issue with the pawls, and I'd take it over to Leo and he'd fix it all the time. Thanks, Leo. But eventually I decided I was just gonna swap out the Zip 303Ss for the Enve 45s. See, I had purchased those for the Athos, and I wasn't riding the Athos as much as I thought that I would. So I put those Pathfinder Pros onto the Enve 45s, and that was kind of one of the final touches to get it to this final phase, and it was probably my favorite setup. Of all the tires and wheels that I ever ran, the Enve 45s with the Pathfinder Pros are just phenomenal. Some would argue that the 45s are simply too deep for gravel, but I can tell you after having ridden them, they're really not that bad, and when they're out on the road, they're really quick and snappy. So for a do-it-all bike, I think they're a decent option. Probably the right in between would be a set of 3/4s. And this was a setup I ran for just about the entire summer. If I was riding road group rides with friends and I didn't want to pull out the tarmac, I would just inflate the tires to 50 PSI, and I had a pretty decent road bike to hang in road group rides. Was it harder? Absolutely, but it was still achievable. And then if I wanted to go ride some gravel, well, I would just air down to 35 or 40 PSI and just go shred some light gravel, and I absolutely loved it. And as a travel bike, it was fantastic. With one set of wheels, I could do just about everything that I wanted to do. And now in this final phase, the only change that I've made is that I've swapped these Pathfinder Pro tires for a set of the S-Works Pathfinder tires, simply because they're like 100 grams lighter per tire, which is not an insignificant amount, and I think it's worth a couple extra bucks if you're looking for a set of tires. So the question becomes, is the Crux still worth it a year later? And I would argue that it absolutely is. In every single phase, I have enjoyed the Crux. While I've ridden a ton of road this year, it's always been the Crux that I want to ride. Every time I ride the Crux, it's fun, it's always an adventure, and it just puts a smile on my face now as much as it did on day one, and that's saying a lot for a bike. If you've seen any of my videos about my road bikes, you'd know that the SL7 is a bike that I really, really like. It's just a bike that works for me, and I've got 10,000 miles on it. And after 2,000 miles on the Crux, I can say that this bike feels like the SL7, but for dirt. It's fast, it's nimble, it's responsive, and for my rides, which often consist of 6 miles to the dirt, 10 or 12 miles on dirt, and then another 6 miles home, well, the Crux in this setup is perfect because I can get to the dirt quickly, I can ride on the dirt quickly, or gravel, whatever you want to call it, and then I can get home quickly before my kids are out of bed, before I have to go to work. And that for me is a dream bike, and it's worth every single penny. In the next videos, I'm gonna talk about the Enve Melee setup as a gravel bike. I'm still trying to figure that one out. I'm gonna do a video about how to choose the right bike. I've had a handful of people reach out to me and ask my suggestion on picking a bike, and I have kind of a unique take on it. And I'm also gonna dive into some other stuff. We've had this Sprinter van and we've been traveling around in it for 2 years now. I wanna talk about how that's changed our family life and the things that we've done. And I'm gonna dive into some stuff that is non-bike related. I mean, look, we're getting into the middle or late October here, and the reality is that a lot of us are kind of putting our bikes away for the winter. It's getting too cold to ride outside. Maybe those bikes are getting anchored to the trainer. We're just not doing as much bike stuff. So I'm gonna explore some other things, some things that we can do in the off season, and really some other things that I'm interested in. Maybe it's because I've already hit my 7,500 miles this year mark, but I'm kind of ready to talk about something else. So I appreciate you sticking around in advance. I promise it'll be worthwhile. And I promise that there's a few more dimensions to some of the things that I do, not simply cycling stuff. But you know, as much as I want to talk about other stuff, I'll probably still ride the Crux a ton this winter because it's just so freaking fun. Anyways, until next time.